Biblesmack. Alright, today, or night, that's when I'm recording it, I figure I just kind of get some stuff off my chest. It's just kind of seeing how things are going right now as far as this ministry and what kind of vision I had and where things are going. I feel as if the last year has been kind of a stepping back and withdrawing a little bit. And there's been a time of loss, and there's a little time of loss. Here's something I just lost. You see that foot there? Well, actually, I lost a toe. I had it. My toe was cut off in surgery. It got infected, amputated, and been kind of dealing with that. That's recent. I've been struggling with diabetes, and as a result, getting other sicknesses. I really didn't get an aspect of the disease, which is that if your sugar is high, your immunity goes down. And so I've had many sicknesses this last year. And, I've been really kind of struggling with how to address things as far as like my internet ministry and stuff. I haven't sealed the door, but the door hasn't been open as far as like the internet radio shows and stuff. Haven't done anything new in quite a while. Then I just focused on some of the videos on YouTube, and then also blogging, and gotten into more intellectual pursuits, which that's good, and it's always good to kind of try to expand your mind a little bit and expand your understanding. But at the same time, the more deeper you get, the less popular it gets. And so I see things going in that point, and I didn't know if I wanted to kind of be one of your vloggers that's really sold out on this stuff, and it's like trying to get what is it, subscriptions. I've not been running out there trying to get everybody subscribed and all that kind of stuff. I really just do my stuff about what I'm passionate about and what's what I see out there and the big picture and stuff like that. And I do local church ministry, and I really just help out and do what I can. I have all the credentials or whatever that's needed to be a pastor at this point, and I did once pastor what's called a house church, and that's where I preached out my own home. I've had other things within normal, or regular, what people deem as normal or deem as regular churches, and youth ministry, deacon, preach, pulpit supply, all that kind of stuff. And I would like to pursue a degree program soon that would help me get a doctorate. But as far as with my life, it's been one of these deals where I've been really just focusing in on getting all this stuff done, and then my ship will come in, and then my ship will come in, and all this kind of stuff. And that's not the way it's happened. I just I don't know if I've really gotten much over the poverty limit, like just about any year that I've worked. Because I'll work and then I'll do all these other side ministries at church, and then there's other stuff going on, other side projects, the political involvement, and then all the different internet ministries. And, it's weird. I feel like I'm following God, but honestly, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm, just hitting every nail and just being perfect and God, I deserve this and that and the other. On some level, sometimes I feel like, as far as I've done the good works, I've done, enough to deserve a decent living, that kind of stuff. But, this is not what I signed up for. And that's something I struggle with. I've felt, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's a huge ego thing, but even since I was a small child, I felt like I was destined to do something big. And then God called me into ministry, into service when I was 19, and He did call me. Remember where Jesus talking to Peter, He says, "Feed my sheep." And I knew that He was talking to me, and I heard the words Matthew, so "Feed my sheep." And my grandfather was a minister, and I knew what was involved in that. I knew that it wasn't, some of these guys that get up on TV in front of the mega church and they get, everybody whooped up around them, and, then they get all this fame and money and all that kind of stuff. No, it's about helping people who can't help themselves. It's about sacrificing and giving up what you have. And it's really about rarely, if ever, getting thanks in return. And, sometimes I deal with my own struggles and my own pride and stuff. And, having to give up part of my body, this last week was really rough. There are times when I'm kind of like with it, I'm in it. I can walk without my toe. I can, once the stitches come out, I'll start getting all that kind of stuff together and being athletic and all that kind of stuff. I know it's in me. My muscles are still in me, and, I could still do a lot of things. But it's very eerie, very weird. The surgery went great. They just, whatever they put in me knocked me right out. And then, I wake up and I don't even know. I mean, you probably look at it too, there's all that wrapping on top, is it really gone? I saw it literally one time. They just unwrapped it, and I just saw, it's like, and then there's the toes, and then what's unnerving is that there's this thing they call phantom pain, but it's more than just phantom pain. I literally still feel my toe on my foot. And if I pass my foot through something to where, my toe should be there, I feel very unnerved, physically, if I just pass my foot through something. And, so it's I can even feel like I'm moving it when I want to. I don't believe it's a mental thing. I think it's a neurological thing. I think that there's something in your nerve system that maps your body out. When I was younger, they used to say, you have a term, and wrestlers would use it a lot. They called it mat sense, and knowing where your body is at all times. And I think that those nerve cords that sense where your body is are still actively sensing what was part of your DNA structure that was part of your foot, or my foot, anyway. Spiritually, I've kind of said it like this. I feel that, like, part of me is dead, but part of me is reborn. Part of me is glorified now. I've already taken my foot and I've stepped into eternity. And that helps me. What's been rough is just, friends and family trying to keep me from driving, not being, encouraged to go out, and of course having to, like, depend on a cane, which I'm getting close. I think I'll be walking on my own soon. My strength has been returning and everything like that. And, I've been exercising and stuff, trying to get everything back, and my sugar is going down, and it's weird. It's still a little technically high for most people, but it's like much, it's way less than what I've lived with for several years, and, just way less. But anyhow, I've been kind of focused on focus on ministry with apologetics, and the issue is that, like, we've had these religious issues and then we have these political issues, and apologetics is really better for the politics. And I know we don't really think that way. We think it's supposed to be part of evangelism, and then we say, well, it don't really work for evangelism. Well, then maybe it's good for politics. That's the issue, is that the reason and the scientific facts and all that kind of stuff, that's something that we're supposed to be able to work with. I say supposed to because a society has to first be civilized. If they don't want to be civilized, they say, ha ha ha, pff, well, apologetics won't work at all then. But basically, if there's some sort of intellectual guard that you would have in a civilized civilization, then, you can work this stuff, and then you can work it through legislation. And so that's what we're trying to do. And, where I'm at with things, when I see, like, the race and stuff like that, I was really working alongside the Tea Party from its start. But I didn't get started with the Tea Party. I got started around 2004. I was dealing with the traditional marriage amendment. Oh, by the way, it's kind of hard for people to draw blood from me, so I still got some scar tissue there. But yeah, it's something to where, the thing that holds up America's type of democracy is the family unit. And so that's why the communists attack the family unit. And it doesn't really matter what people are calling themselves, various forms of socialism. They all will kind of end up winding together. I mean, eventually you end up with some sort of tyranny. That's where this is going to go, but it all has a starting point. Trump is dead wrong when it comes to nationalizing healthcare, and that's why I'm glad I supported Rand Paul. But Rand Paul really failed in his presidential bid because of a lack of nationalism, to understand that there's a difference between someone who is a citizen of the United States and who is not when it comes to being in the United States. We need to get rid of non-citizens. Why? Because we can have equal rights if we have equal citizenship. If you have non-citizens, then you muddy the waters, okay? And you can't have you have barbarism. Because you have somebody who's outside of the law, then they can do or say whatever. And, some of them don't. Some of them are just nice people trying to get through life and get the opportunities because the drug cartels are running Mexico. But by them being here, the drug cartels get paid mucho dinero because all these drug dealers are using the same open routes. And so we're paying for these drugs, and that's paying the mafia, and the mafia is oppressing the people. That's a never-ending cycle. But, God had separated the nations, and that was a fail-safe against man's sin. We're not ready for a one-world government because that would be an absolute power that would be corrupted instantly by man, and it would kill people. So, as a result, we have to stop at nations. Focus on, your government should focus on your nation. So nationalism is a very high ideal, just as much as individualism or capitalism. We have to have an understanding of what America is and what America is not. And as I start to deal with the identity, my studies this year really focused in on this historic thing dealing with a character named Joseph of Arimathea, who is in the Bible, and dealing with the huge amount of folklore and then archaeological evidence that added up to the point of Joseph of Arimathea going to England, the ancient England, and being the first missionary, not the first bishop. That was Aristobulus, who was mentioned briefly at the end of the Paul's letter to the Romans. But this ended up being the ignition, the explosion of the Spirit that created the first Christ-proclaiming nation. Okay, the first nation to have proclaimed Christ was in Britain under King Lucius. And then later, King Alfred would institute the Mosaic Law as part. Now, there would be some synergy, obviously. A lot of laws are only fashioned for that one nation, but basically the Ten Commandments and some other issues were focused upon taken from the Mosaic Law and put into the Anglo Law. And that Saxon common law would become the British common law and now the American common law. That has an identity that draws us as a people back to Christ. And as it draws us as a people back to Christ, it comes forth and identifies things like the Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment of the Constitution operates in accordance with common law, which was American common law, descending all the way back to the Ten Commandments. And what that means is that if you look at the Ninth Amendment, you'd know that those 8, including 7, the Seventh Amendment that I just mentioned, is never to be altered. Never. According to the Ninth Amendment. And all this crud about the 16th Amendment cannot, by logic, cannot alter those first 8 amendments. And so as a result, the whole gay marriage amendment thing was ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. The forcing of gay marriage broke the law. It was purely un-American, not only in the spirit, but in the Constitution. We have to ignite a people of God. This is why I've created a series of books. I didn't create, but I've made the list. But I made this list of books that embody these principles. Now, when I talk about this English culture history, you have to understand something, especially the Baptist church. Church is multicultural. The nation has to be cultural. Nations cannot be multicultural unless they're empires. Okay? So if you don't want to be an empire, then you just have to represent your culture. But this culture, especially the Baptist, is a inclusive culture. That means we take others in. Now, African Americans, there's a movement that I really like called the Descendants of American Slaves, in which they open up and they're honest about where their true roots are. And this has to be understood because there was a pejorative of black and Negro and then the N-word that they felt had disparaged them as a people and made them second class. And they said, well, what we'll do to it is we'll say African American. The problem with that is that African American acts as if it's an immigration issue, if these are just immigrants. But they're not immigrants. This was a people that was traumatized on a massive scale, an entire people that basically was likened into molested or raped. And so some of the cultural, psychological healing that was needed was never done. And that is what has been wounding them ever since. And they've been manipulated into things that they themselves would have nothing to do with. But this people, the descendants of American slaves, were adopted into the American culture. And some of them will open up and say, that is what we are. We're not just African. Okay, we speak the English language. You know, they read. And they read from the English language. And the Christianity was a culture that was placed upon them. And so they are the children of that culture, that parent culture. But what is not even understood, even if you get to that part, okay, is the fact that you have two other stories. The good news and the bad news. The bad news, which I certainly do not want to impose, okay? Culturally, I do not want to impose this as far as like, you know, as a Christian, I'm to love everybody, okay? And I do not want to hurt people by bringing up this information. But I do think it could help because there are extreme African racists today. And they are capitalizing on our ignorance. And so they pose the descendants of American slaves as simply the innocent lambs who never did anything to anybody. And so therefore, everything is owed to them. Well, number one, that's unbiblical. Ezekiel chapter 18. You do not punish the son for the sins of the father. You do not punish the father for the sins of the son. We are dealt with individually. In order to be American, you have to understand that too. Okay, to be American. You don't come here as a prince. You don't come here as a criminal. You come here as an individual. Okay? Freedom. That's what that means. We all start off on the same plane, and then we are judged to our character and to our works and to our deeds. Okay? Personal responsibility. But basically, there was a slave trade of white people. We typically talk about the Moors, these African Muslims who took over. They had a slave trade that went all the way to the 1830s. Not 1530, not 1630, not 1730, 1830. Okay? Several 100,000 white people enslaved. About the same number as far as the slave trade in America. As far as how many were bought. Now their number multiplied to 4 million. And that's massive. Which means that there was no genocide. You can't call it genocide if you went from 300,000, say, to 3 per million. So then we're talking about 12. But then you got 400,000, so 13. Okay, so a little over, if you multiply a little over about 13 as far as your population, then you're not being wiped out. Okay. But basically, that's the bad news. The good news is that there is a heritage that was robbed. And the Africans are not just the people who came from witch doctors, and they're not just the people that came from Muslims. You see, God had been working on the people of Africa, if you look through the Bible. And, one of the prophecies, let's see here, Zephaniah, I think it was, that prophecy took place in Africa. Rahab was, Hamitic. Jesus' genealogy. All right. But there was New Testament churches that spread in North Africa. Some were kind of liberal. I never really liked the Alexandrian school. The Ethiopians have their good days and their bad days. And unfortunately, they got led astray a lot by the Egyptians. But then when you go up north, I think where modern-day Libya is, there were a lot of very strong, very devout Christians. That's where Tertullian came out of. Augustine had his good side and his bad side, and he was also out of there. Mostly theologically, I don't like him among Christians, but obviously he did a lot for Christianity at the same time. And some people would count him as number one. I'm not going there, but he was a genius and he was successful and stuff like that. But he oppressed some of these guys who were the real deal. First it was the Montanist, and then later came the Donatist. And basically, I think that with those two traditions, you have this true Christianity, and then the fake Christianity, the Catholicism, helped out. And Alberto Rivera is somebody who really talked about this a lot. But basically, they helped prop up the Muslims to kill off all their competitors. Okay, so the Catholics paid off the Muslims to take off their competitors, the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Northern African Church. And, of course, it backfired a little bit because then they started getting too much power. And they decided, oh, we'll take over Jerusalem now. But basically, they came in and they wiped that out. And so there was a heritage there for the descendant of slaves. There is a heritage of true Christianity. And I think that was being absorbed back into America. And that is the point. Going through that process. And I know that it was a physical slavery and that there was oppression, but you really don't know the whole story. You're not using your Christian worldview to understand that this is where this people found redemption. And this is where they called upon the name of Jesus. Okay, and I look at, like I was reading Sojourner Truth and stuff like that, read her autobiography, and I know these people depended on Jesus to save them, and Jesus redeemed them, and he did. Okay, through that process. And so you have this people of God coming out of that, but they are merged into this tradition. And in Isaiah, there's a prophecy about how the Gentiles of Tarshish shall come and serve Israel. I believe that Tarshish, the outline would be from northern Spain through France all the way up to England, especially England, because they would get their tin there. And Solomon's temple was filled with a lot of tin that came from Tarshish. And that would have been pinpointed in the mines over in Cornwall, England. But the little Tarshish was also the big Tarshish. What do I mean? Think about Canada. You have the French and the English. and the American English, and then the Spanish, and Portugal, I mean, basically all of the Americas have their headship going back into the Tarshish nations. And you also have this multiplication of prosperity. And, we have been there and we've stepped up for Israel. We do have to be careful about that, though, because Israel right now is not spiritually alive. It's only just like the Valley of Dry Bones. You're getting the bones together. They're linking up. They're starting to get some flesh. But they're not regenerated. They're not born again. Okay? And so, I do understand that there are Zionist forces that are not working on the side of Jesus. They're not working on the side of God, and they're definitely not on the side of Jesus. But there are Jews who are on the side of God, and there are some Jews who are starting to come around to Jesus. And so I do see that as an end times thing, and we have to understand ourselves of who we are and our identity. Because that's one of the big things, the whole multiculturalism of the socialist left is to destroy our identities. If we no longer understand ourselves to be a people of God, then we don't act according to God. And don't get me wrong, most of our country doesn't. They see themselves as the product of random evolution. They don't see any such concept as property. They think that we belong to the earth instead of the earth belonging to us. So they don't see property rights, so that they don't have to respect property rights and they can impose an empire. So, establishing that cultural identity. And as I said, just so I don't confuse the people who want to be confused, when I talk about establishing that identity, it is not an identity that's based on color or flesh, okay? America was always open. Individuals obviously had their own opinions. Evil people have dealt in America. But as far as what the nature of this identity is, has always been inclusive and included many cultures. And so when we understand that, we're not into this micro-nationalism or this Nazism or whatever, okay? But we are establishing a people who are out for the good. And that's what we want to do, is establish that identity, the people who are out for the good. But basically, that has been the agenda, is to destroy our identity, destroy where we come from, so that we will never realize that we have anything to help us. In other words, the government doesn't want us to know that we the people means us. Okay? And I know it's American, but still, whoever is, as far as like this story, whoever's a part of this story, that's what's going on, is us. Now, I do encourage people, if you're in another nation, then you should fight for that nation to become more godly and more free and independent. And those things can work together if you are adhering to the true religion, the New Testament faith. Some people call it Baptist, but some Baptists don't call themselves Christian anymore. So, you got to be careful about all that kind of stuff. I've had a lot of good opportunities. I was part of a debate recently dealing with Genesis. I was taking on a theistic evolutionist, and they wanted to alter the debate. But basically what it was supposed to be me bringing up scientific evidence that supported Genesis 1 through 11. But yet I'd have to, word it differently, because some people who are full of it, people who don't care about the Bible, they don't adhere to the Bible, they don't have any understanding of the regulative principle. They have no understanding of the what was it? Historical grammatical hermeneutic, understanding just the basic structures and everything like that of interpretation. People that just don't care and just want to make it whatever they want so they can fit their tradition with their new philosophy. You know, they want to argue, okay, which one's the right interpretation? Well, that wasn't really the goal of that debate. The goal of that debate was, is there scientific evidence that would agree to the traditional interpretation? And basically, I didn't, you know, if you were debating me, what you should have done is come up with reasons why my scientific evidence doesn't work, you know. Debunk it, say it's wrong, you know. And if not, say why it's not making it or whatever. But the opponent I had really tried to make it more about that evidence doesn't prove that your interpretation is true. You know, it's I spelled it out. That's not what I believe. I mean, from the start. But anyhow, I still, even with a little bit of controversy, I still was voted as the winner because my opponent really couldn't defend their position. And honestly, that's all I ever get. Evolutionists never really defend their interpretation as true. They just attack you. That's all they can do. And they attack, they attack, they attack. They might block, but that's all they're doing is they're just attacking your position. They don't defend what they say is true because they know they're going to change their views. They know they're probably in the process of changing their views. But I was pretty happy to do that. I did that while getting my toe amputated, you know. So that was pretty wild. But let's see here. But I was glad I had the opportunity to do it, and you know, maybe do it again if they're okay with it or whatever. You know, you gotta read the tea leaves. You don't want them to freak out and ban you or something. Let's see here, and then I'm coming out with a book. I do want to make an effect with this book. Our preachers need to preach out of the Bible. And what's being taught to be the Bible, what's being sold as the Bible, is not really the Bible. When you're altering the Greek and the Hebrew manuscripts, you're messing with God. You really are. When I ask about the last couple verses of Revelation, and they say, whatever. That is such a disgust. I mean, you have to be a pig. You have to be a foul, nasty, you know, feces-covered pig to, in good conscience, do that before the Lord Almighty. You know, have no problem with altering His words. You know, I try to explain, I'm not just talking about translation, I'm talking about the Greek and the Hebrew and the whole 9 yards. I mean, are you really wanting to cut verses out of the Bible and add verses and stuff like that? But yeah, I'll throw this out there and they just, hey, we don't care, you know, because at the end of the day, most of our nation has an understanding of man-made religion. Most of the Christians are in a man-made religion. God, I believe in you as much as I want to, and no more. You know, when you bless me, I believe in that. When you curse me, well, you're done. You're through. Let's see here. It says in chapter 22, verse 19, if any man shall take away from the words of this book, of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city from the things which are written in this book. And in the Greek, the modern translations change the Greek. They say it's the tree of life instead of the book of life. That's in the very verse that it's warning. And I mentioned to people, and there's no fear of God. No fear of God in the eyes of these Christians. No fear of God in the eyes of the pastors. And I'm supposed to like, oh, but we're all good and everything's great. Yeah, mock God. Mock my God, you pastor. I'm supposed to be okay with that. Go ahead, mock him. Mock him. Just tear it all down. And you want to sit there like a nasty, retarded bull without any ability to, like, reason. What am I supposed to do with that? Yeah, I still love you. It's just that now I've got to love you like I love, the drug dealer. Yeah, it's like, but, hey, everybody's got issues, everybody's got problems. Maybe it's just that a lot of these ministers are in that SJW warrior thing, and they don't have logic. Maybe they just don't have the ability to comprehend logic and stuff. They're thinking out their emotions. If they'd only get to those basics of logic, then maybe they'd start to realize the error of their ways. I hope. I've got sin in my heart. I'm only saved by grace. Okay, I can't go with that. I can't be sitting here saying like, well, I'm better than you. I'm not. Okay, I'm not better than you. But we gotta be careful. Jesus did so much for us, and we're gonna sit there and play around with His word. That is taking the name of the Lord in vain, by the way. When you claim to be a man of God, and yet you have no problem altering the word, I just hope maybe, there's demonic possession or something that's explaining why you have that attitude. And I'm not even on this, I'm not on that lordship crap, okay? I'm not sitting here saying, well, you better show signs or he ain't gonna love you no more. No, I'm not. I'm not playing that game, okay? But I am saying that your life, if you want blessings in your life, then you follow that calling the way it ought to be, and you become a slave to Christ. And it's hard to reconcile that. Because once again, all I can say is I'm only saved by God's grace. Yet at the same time, there are actions and consequences. Alright? Yeah, if you hate somebody, it's like you committed murder in your heart. But there's still going to be more consequences if you just hate somebody and get over it than if you go and slash their throat. So, there's just more consequences if you go out and you twist God's word as if you are bigger and stronger than God. And so my book is a new look at an old word. I might put it on here. It's still got utterly destroyed. I've had to put it back together. And there's still stuff. There's still problems here and there. And sometimes the text is acting up with me. All of a sudden it'll splice things down or separate something. And so, I still got to work on it before it becomes like officially published. But I'll still work on that, okay? So it will have some issues there. But basically, you'll just look at scholar after scholar in the Word of God. Boom, 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 laid the whole thing out, okay? And that's really what that's about. There's other books out there, but this one, I'm focused. This is what God put on my heart, and I hope He has mercy on me in order to get it out there. And, basically, I hope it puts a dent into new evangelicalism. I hope that people kind of wake up, and realize, okay, look, you can give your band a makeover, you can make over your church walls and all that kind of stuff, but don't mess with God's word. It doesn't need a makeover. It's perfect just the way it is. All right. So that's just some of the things I've been up to. I do pray for you, my audience. I pray that God just blesses you in your life. I pray that you are protected. I pray that if there's anything that you need from me, I mean, obviously, if there's a way you can contact me, obviously you can respond on YouTube and stuff. But if there is something that, that my ministry on the internet can provide you, I pray that you have an extra ability to receive those things, that you're just able to find the message that God wanted you to receive. And I pray for your families. I pray for health and all the good blessings and stuff. And also just that, like, if you're lost, I pray that you receive the gospel of Christ and that you have eternal life and that we can all be joyful and happy in heaven. And I also pray that if you are a Christian and you feel weak and, just lacking any power to make a difference, that God would give you power and boldness so that you can share the gospel, the power of God unto salvation with other people. That's one of the biggest things this is about. And so, I just say God bless you, and I'll see you next time.